Gather round, young'uns, gather round. Let the crackling of this fire warm your bones and chase away the chill of this Arkansas night. You see them shadows dancing in the trees? Well, sometimes it ain't just the firelight making a move. Sometimes it's something else. Something old, something restless. Tonight, I reckon I'll spin you a yarn or two, something to make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up straight. We'll start with a road you might have even traveled yourself, a long winding stretch of asphalt that cuts right through the heart of this state. Highway 67. But don't let its familiar look fool ya, because parts of that old highway, well, they ain't quite right. They got a darkness clinging to 'em, a sadness that just won't let go. They say it's cursed. Now, Highway 67 ain't bad all the way through, mind you. There are stretches where folks drive along without a worry in the world, just heading home or off on an adventure. But there are other parts, especially in the more lonesome stretches, where the trees crowd in close on either side, and the moonlight barely manages to peek through. It's in these places that the stories whisper on the wind, tales of accidents that just don't make sense, of folks seeing things they can't explain. Old Man Hemmings, he used to run the gas station just south of Newport, back before they built that fancy interstate bypass. He swore up and down that he'd seen it himself, more times than he cared to count. He said it was like the highway had a mind of its own in certain spots. Cars would just drift off the road for no reason. Tires would blow out on perfectly smooth pavement, and sometimes folks would swear they saw a figure standing right in the middle of the lane, only to vanish into thin air when they got closer. One story that always stuck with me was about a young couple, barely out of high school, driving back late one night from a movie over in Batesville. It was a clear night, stars scattered across the black velvet sky like diamonds. They were holding hands, singing along to the radio, just happy to be together. They were on one of those lonely stretches of 67, not another car in sight for miles. Then, as they rounded a gentle curve, the young man driving said the headlights caught something in the road ahead. It looked like a shadow, but darker, thicker. He squinted, trying to make it out, but it just seemed to writhe and shift in the dim light. He slowed down, his heart starting to thump a little faster. "What is it?" the girl asked, her voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer, his eyes glued to the figure. As they got closer, it seemed to grow, to take on a vague human shape, but distorted, twisted. It didn't move, just stood there, blocking the entire lane. The young man slammed on the brakes, the tires screaming in protest. The car skidded to a stop just a few feet from the figure. They both stared, frozen in fear. The air in the car suddenly felt heavy, cold. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the figure was gone. Vanished. The road ahead was empty. Shaken, the young man put the car in park and just stared at the empty stretch of highway. He couldn't explain what they'd seen. Neither of them could. They sat there for a long time, the silence broken only by the crickets chirping in the woods. Finally, he put the car in drive and slowly pulled away, his eyes darting nervously into the darkness on either side of the road. They made it home that night, but they never drove that stretch of Highway 67 again after dark. They said the feeling of dread, the icy grip of fear they felt in that moment, stayed with them. And they weren't the only ones. There are other stories, darker ones, about cars veering off the road into the trees, about drivers losing control for no apparent reason. Some folks whisper about a malevolent spirit, a presence tied to the land, angered by something that happened long ago. They say it reaches out unseen and guides unsuspecting travelers to their doom. Now, I ain't saying it's all true, mind you. Could just be bad luck, folks getting tired on a long drive. But there's a feeling you get on certain parts of that highway, a sense of unease, like you're not quite alone. And after hearing enough of these stories over the years, well, it makes a fellow wonder. The fire's getting low, and the night's still young. That story about Highway 67, well, that's just the start. There are other strange things that happen in these Ozark Hills, things that ain't easily explained, things that make you look over your shoulder when you're walking alone in the dark. So let me toss another log on this fire, and we'll get ready for the next tale. It's about lights in the sky, unexplained and eerie, that dance over the quiet fields just outside of Dover. They call them the Dover Lights. And trust me, youngins, they ain't like any stars you've ever seen. All right, settle down. Settle down. Let the embers glow and cast their spooky light. After a drive down that cursed stretch of Highway 67, I reckon we could all use a look up at the sky, right? But the stars ain't the only things that twinkle in the Arkansas night. Tonight's next story takes us over to Pope County, near the little town of Dover. Ever heard tell of the Dover Lights? Now these ain't your run-of-the-mill fireflies, blinking on and off in the humid air. These are different. Folks who've seen them describe them as balls of light, sometimes just a single one, other times a whole cluster, dancing and moving in ways that no airplane or helicopter ever could. They change colors too, some say, from a soft white to a fiery orange, even a ghostly blue. My uncle Jedediah, he lived out past Dover for a good many years, up on a ridge overlooking the Illinois Bayou. He was a man of the earth, Jedediah was, believed in what he could see and touch. But even he couldn't explain what he saw in the sky some nights. He told me once, sitting right where you young'uns are sitting now, the fire crackling between us, that he was out on his porch one cool autumn evening. The air was still, the only sound the hooting of an owl in the distance. He was just enjoying the peace and quiet when he saw it, a single light low on the horizon over towards the fields. At first, he figured it was a car, maybe someone taking a late-night drive down a back road. But then the light started to move, smooth and silent, lifting up into the air. It wasn't blinking like an airplane, and it didn't have any of the telltale signs of a helicopter. It was just a steady glow, like a giant, luminous marble floating in the dark. He watched it for a good long while, this light moving in strange patterns, sometimes hovering in one spot, then darting off suddenly in a different direction. It would change in brightness too, dimming down almost to nothing, then flaring up again, bright as a harvest moon. Jedediah said he felt a chill run down his spine, a sense that he was seeing something he wasn't meant to see, something that belonged to a world beyond his understanding. He wasn't a fearful man, but that night, he said he felt a primal unease, like something ancient was stirring in the darkness. He wasn't the only one who saw him. Over the years, there have been plenty of folks around Dover who've witnessed these strange lights. Farmers out checking on their livestock late at night, couples parked on Lover's Lane, even the occasional state trooper on patrol. Their stories all share a common thread. Lights in the sky that defy any logical explanation. Some folks try to say they're swamp gas, rising up from the lowlands. Others claim they're secret military aircraft, testing out new technology, but the descriptions often don't fit. These lights move too fast, too erratically, and they're seen too often by too many people to be easily dismissed. There's a tale about a group of teenagers back in the 80s who went out looking for the lights one night. They drove down some of the dirt roads outside of Dover, flashlights in hand, hoping to catch a glimpse. They parked their truck on a deserted stretch of road and cut the engine, listening to the night sounds. After a while, they started to see them. Not just one, but 3 lights appearing low in the sky over a distant field. They watched as the lights danced and weaved, getting closer and then drifting away. One of the bolder boys decided to try and get a better look, so he started walking across the field towards them. His friends called after him, telling him to be careful, but he just waved them off. He kept walking, the lights seeming to beckon him forward. But as he got closer, the lights suddenly changed. They grew brighter, almost blinding, and started moving towards him at an incredible speed. He panicked and turned to run back to the truck, but he tripped and fell in the rough field. His friends watched in horror as the lights hovered over him for a moment, then shot straight up into the sky and disappeared. When they finally reached him, he was shaken and pale, but unharmed. He couldn't explain what had happened, but he swore he felt a presence near those lights, something cold and watchful. Now, what are these Dover lights? Are they some kind of natural phenomenon we just don't understand yet? Are they secret government experiments? Or could they be something else entirely? Something otherworldly? Nobody knows for sure. And that's what makes them so darn unsettling. They're a mystery hanging in the Arkansas sky, a reminder that there are things out there that we can't quite grasp. The fire's burning steady now, and the night still holds its secrets tight. We've talked about cursed roads and mysterious lights. For our next story, we're going to delve a little deeper into the woods, into the shadowy corners of the Ozarks, where some say strange creatures roam. Creatures with heads like melons, and a hunger for things best left undisturbed. Get ready, young'uns, for the tale of the melon heads. All right, gather closer, you two. The woods can play tricks on your eyes and ears at night, especially in these old Ozark hills. After hearing about haunted highways and ghost lights, it's time we talked about something a little more tangible, though no less strange. Have you ever heard whisperings of the melon heads? Now, this ain't a story for the faint of heart. These ain't friendly forest critters we're talking about. The legends of the melon heads run deep in these parts. Tales of peculiar beings said to dwell in the most remote, shadowy corners of the Ozarks. Places where the trees grow thick and the sunlight barely touches the ground. The descriptions vary a bit depending on who you're talking to, but the main thread stays the same. They're described as being small in stature, with pale, almost sickly skin. But the most striking feature, the one that gives them their name, is their heads. Large, elongated, and smooth, like oversized melons perched atop their frail bodies. Some folks even say you can see the veins pulsating beneath their thin skin. The origins of these melon heads are shrouded in mystery and whispered rumors. One of the most common stories links them to old, forgotten asylums that supposedly existed deep within the Ozark wilderness. The tale goes that these asylums housed individuals with severe mental and physical deformities, including hydrocephalus, a condition that causes an abnormal buildup of fluid in the brain, leading to an enlarged head. The story continues that either through neglect, accidental release, or even a violent escape, some of these patients found their way into the surrounding woods. Unable to integrate into normal society, they retreated further and further into the wilderness, their appearance and isolation twisting them into the figures of legend. Another, darker version of the tale speaks of inbred communities living in the most isolated hollows of the Ozarks. These communities, cut off from the outside world for generations, are said to have developed strange genetic anomalies, resulting in the distinct large heads of the melon heads. These versions often paint them as hostile and territorial, fiercely protective of their hidden existence. Whatever their true origins, the stories agree on one thing: the melon heads are to be avoided. They're said to be shy and reclusive, but if encountered, they can be dangerous. Some tales depict them as mischievous, playing cruel tricks on unsuspecting hikers or campers, stealing supplies, or leaving behind unsettling signs of their presence. Other stories paint a far more sinister picture. These versions whisper of the melon heads being predatory, driven by a primal hunger. They're said to stalk the woods at night, their large eyes glinting in the darkness, searching for anything they can catch. There are even old legends that link them to disappearances in the more remote areas of the Ozarks, though these are usually just hushed rumors passed down through generations. Old Mrs. Gable, who lived way back in a holler outside of Mountain View, used to tell a story about her grandfather's encounter with a melon head. He was a trapper, she said, and one winter he set his lines deep in the woods. One morning, when he went to check his traps, he found one of them sprung, but the animal was gone. Instead, there were strange three-fingered tracks in the snow around the trap, leading off into the dense underbrush. He followed the tracks for a ways, curiosity getting the better of him, until he came to a small, crudely built shelter made of branches and leaves. He peered inside, and that's when he saw it. A small, pale figure huddled in the shadows, its large, bald head turning slowly to look at him. Its eyes were big and dark, and Mrs. Gable's grandfather said they held an intelligence that was both unsettling and alien. He didn't stick around to find out more. He backed away slowly, never taking his eyes off the creature, and then turned and ran faster than he ever had in his life. He never went back to those traps, and he never spoke of what he saw to anyone for years, fearing ridicule. But on his deathbed, he finally told his granddaughter the tale, swearing it was true. Now, you might hear folks laugh these stories off, call them just old wives' tales meant to scare children. But there's a persistence to these legends, a thread that runs through the stories told in different parts of the Ozarks. And when you're out in these woods at night, the shadows playing tricks on your eyes, and you hear a rustling in the underbrush that ain't quite right, well, it's easy to let your imagination run wild. The fire's still holding strong, pushing back the darkness. We've journeyed down a cursed highway and gazed at mysterious lights in the sky. Now, we've touched on the strange inhabitants some say lurk in these very woods. For our next story, we're going to stay in the Ozarks, but we're going to talk about a sound that chills the blood and echoes through the valleys on moonless nights, a sound they call the Black Howler. So get ready, because this one will make you listen to the wind in a whole new way. All right, the fire's crackling good now, throwing sparks up into the inky black. After them tales of melon-headed folk creeping through the woods, it's time we talked about a sound. A sound that ain't human, ain't animal, but something altogether more unsettling. They call it the Black Howler of the Ozarks. Now, most folks around here have heard tell of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, that hairy giant said to roam the wilder parts of the country. But the Black Howler, well, it's something else entirely. It's like Bigfoot's meaner, shadowier cousin, a creature steeped in a deeper kind of fear. Where Bigfoot is often described as shy and avoiding human contact, the Black Howler is said to be more aggressive. Its presence marked by a chilling vocalization that can freeze the blood in your veins. It ain't just a whoop or a holler, it's a deep, guttural howl that seems to vibrate right through your bones, carrying a note of pure, primal dread. Descriptions of the creature itself are scarce and often vague, usually glimpsed in the dead of night or through thick foliage. But those who claim to have seen it describe a large, dark, ape-like figure, even more massive and shadowy than the traditional Bigfoot. Some say its fur is so black it seems to absorb the light, making it blend seamlessly with the darkness of the forest. The legends of the Black Howler tend to be localized to the more remote and rugged areas of the Ozarks, the places where the hollers run deep and the trees stand tall and ancient. These are the kinds of places where the wind whispers secrets and the shadows dance in ways that can play tricks on your mind. Old Man Tiber, he lived his whole life up in the Boston Mountains, a part of the Ozarks known for its wild and untamed beauty. He was a hunter and a trapper, spent more time alone in the woods than with other folks. He always swore there was something out there, something big and dark that wasn't a bear or a panther. He told me once, his eyes wide and a little haunted even in his old age, about a night he spent camped out near Richland Creek. The moon was just a sliver in the sky, and the woods were darker than pitch. He had a good fire going, keeping the chill away and the critters at bay, or so he thought. Around midnight, just when he was starting to drift off to sleep, he heard it. A sound that started low, a deep rumble in the chest, and then rose into a piercing howl that echoed through the silent woods. It wasn't the howl of a coyote, not the scream of a bobcat, nothing he'd ever heard before. It was deeper, more resonant, and it carried a weight of something ancient and powerful. He said the sound seemed to come from all around him, bouncing off the hills and the trees, making it impossible to pinpoint its exact location. His dogs, usually fearless trackers, whined and huddled close to the fire, their fur standing on end. Tiber himself felt a cold dread grip him, a feeling of being utterly vulnerable in the face of something unknown and immense. The howls continued for what felt like an eternity, each one sending shivers down his spine. He kept the fire stoked high, his rifle clutched tight in his hands, his eyes darting nervously into the surrounding darkness. As suddenly as it began, the howling stopped, leaving behind a silence that felt just as heavy and oppressive. He didn't sleep a wink that night. As soon as the first hint of dawn broke through the trees, he packed up his camp and got out of there, not stopping until he reached the familiar comfort of his cabin. He never camped in that area again, and whenever he heard a strange sound in the woods at night, he always remembered the chilling howl of the black creature. There are other stories too, whispers among hunters and hikers who've claimed to hear the same unearthly sound. Some say the howl is a warning, a territorial call to stay out of its domain. Others believe it's a hunting cry, a prelude to something far more dangerous. One particularly unsettling tale tells of a group of campers who went missing in the Buffalo River wilderness. Their campsite was found undisturbed, their gear still there, but the campers were gone without a trace. The only thing out of the ordinary was a series of large, indistinct tracks leading away from the camp and the faint, lingering echo of a deep, mournful howl that some of the search party claimed to have heard in the distance. Now, is the black howler just a figment of overactive imaginations, the product of fear and the isolation of the deep woods? Or is there something truly out there, a creature that science hasn't yet accounted for, whose chilling cry echoes through the Ozark nights? Whatever the truth may be, the legend of the black howler serves as a stark reminder that even in familiar places, there can be mysteries lurking in the shadows, sounds that can stir a primal fear within us. The fire's burning low again, the embers glowing like watchful eyes in the darkness. We've heard tales of cursed roads, mysterious lights, strange forest dwellers, and a chilling cry in the night. For our final story tonight, we're going to leave these woods behind and head to a place where the past lingers in a different way. A place of confinement, of sorrow, and maybe of lingering spirits. We're going to talk about the ghosts of the Arkansas State Penitentiary. So, brace yourselves, young'uns, because this last story might just keep you up all night. All right, the fire's just embers now, casting a faint, eerie glow on our faces. The woods are quiet, holding their breath, it seems. After all them creatures and howls in the dark, our last story tonight takes us to a place built by human hands, but stained by human suffering. We're talking about the ghosts of the Arkansas State Penitentiary, specifically the old Tucker and Cummins units. Now, these weren't just ordinary prisons, mind you. They had a reputation, a dark cloud hanging over them for decades. Cummins, still standing in some form, and Tucker, which is mostly gone now, both saw their share of hard times, violence, and despair. And where there's that much pain etched into the very stones and soil, well, sometimes it leaves a mark that even time can't erase. Sometimes it leaves behind ghosts. Tucker, in particular, had a truly brutal history. It was known for its harsh conditions and the infamous Tucker telephone. Now, this wasn't no regular phone. It was a homemade torture device that used an electric generator to shock inmates. They said the screams could be heard for miles on a still night. The very air around that place seemed thick with agony and fear. Even after the Tucker telephone was dismantled and the unit eventually closed, the stories lingered. Folks who worked there, guards and staff, would tell tales of unexplained phenomena. They'd hear disembodied voices whispering in the empty cell blocks, the echoes of long-gone inmates still trapped within those walls. Doors would creak open and slam shut on their own. Cold spots would appear suddenly, even on the hottest Arkansas days, a chill that felt like a hand reaching out from beyond. Shadowy figures were often reported, fleeting glimpses in the corners of their eyes, or dark shapes moving in the periphery. Some folks swore they saw the spectral forms of former inmates, their faces etched with pain and anger, still walking the corridors of their eternal prison. One old guard, a fella named Ray, told me about his time working the night shift at Tucker back in the 70s. He was making his rounds one quiet night, the only sound the clank of his keys and his own footsteps echoing down the long, empty hallway. He passed a solitary confinement cell that had been empty for years. The steel door rusted shut. Just as he walked by, he heard a faint but distinct cough from inside. A dry, rattling cough, like someone with a lung full of dust and despair. Ray froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew there wasn't anyone in that cell. He checked the logbook himself just an hour before. He stood there for a long moment, listening intently, but the cough didn't come again. He hurried on, trying to shake it off as his imagination playing tricks on him in the dead of night. But he never forgot that sound, that ghostly cough from an empty cell. Cummins Unit, still operational, has its own share of eerie tales. Built on former plantation land, it has seen generations of inmates pass through its gates, many of them meeting violent ends within its walls. Over the years, staff and even some inmates have reported strange occurrences. There are stories of a heavy, oppressive atmosphere in certain areas, a feeling of being watched or followed. Some have reported the distinct smell of stale cigarette smoke in places where smoking hasn't been allowed for years. Others have heard the faint sounds of footsteps when no one else is around, or the muffled cries of someone in distress. One particularly persistent story at Cummins involves a certain cell block where inmates claim to see the shadowy figure of a man hanging in one of the empty cells. They say he appears briefly, a dark silhouette against the dim light, before vanishing without a sound. No one knows who he might have been, but the story has been passed down through the years. And then there are the stories of objects moving on their own, tools disappearing and reappearing in different locations, and the feeling of unseen hands brushing against you in the empty corridors. These aren't always dramatic hauntings, but they create a pervasive sense of unease, a feeling that the past is still very much alive within those concrete walls. Some folks believe that the intense suffering and violence that occurred within these prisons have left an indelible mark on the place, trapping the spirits of those who died there, their pain and anger forever echoing in the silence. They say the land itself is soaked with the memories of despair. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's no doubt that places like Tucker and Cummins carry a heavy history. A history of hardship, brutality, and loss. And sometimes, in the dead of night, when the wind whispers through the empty buildings or rattles the bars on the windows, it's easy to imagine that the echoes of that history are still lingering there, just beyond the veil of our perception. Well, the fire's nothing but glowing coals now, and the night has grown deep. We've shared tales of cursed roads, strange lights, shadowy creatures, eerie howls, and the lingering spirits of a troubled past. The woods around us are quiet, but after these stories, I reckon they might feel a little different tonight. Keep your ears open, young'uns, and your eyes peeled. You never know what secrets these old Arkansas hills might hold. Now let's get some sleep before the sun peeks over the horizon, if you can.
Thanks for joining us in the shadows tonight. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories every week. Have you got a story of your own? Share it in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And remember, the darkness holds many secrets. Are you brave enough to uncover them? Until next time, keep your lights on and your doors locked. Sweet nightmares.